Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Adam Goodman, partner at Ballard Partners. The second Republican debate was Wednesday night. So, Adam, to kick things off, what were your takeaways? What moments stood out to you?
Well, I think it was a debate looking for relevance. I'm not sure it scored on that front. Obviously, the former president, Donald Trump, had his own program going on right before the debate took place, just as he programmed with Tucker Carlson during the first Republican debate. Um, this was a night where you were thinking maybe, just maybe, someone would break from the pack among those who are trying to be the one to take on Donald Trump for the Republican nomination. That didn't happen last night. I think a lot of things did happen, uh, but not that. And one of the big takeaways, Brittany, is that uh, the moderators themselves. We always focus on the candidates and the campaigns. The moderators. When I've done a lot of debate training over the course of my career with a lot of candidates, a lot of similar situations. I think the moderators need debate training. And I say that without trying to be smug. They need to understand this is a whole different kind of medium, Brittany, in terms of their performance, which is a big part of the show. And I don't think they were ready for it. I don't think they were ready for it in the first debate either, because this isn't a media personality with a lot of television experience sitting behind a desk and talking about the news. This is them actively, in a way, imagine it's like a prize ring. It's a fight. And they're the referee in the middle of the ring, amid the warring combatants, right? That's a different environment for them. And I think they need to learn from that and they need to train for that, because when the moderators aren't strong and aren't giving the audience a chance to get what they really want, which is information and impressions, as opposed to the near fisticuffs that seem to happen with more regularity than ever in debates. That's not a service to the audience. And it's a disservice, I think, to the process where we're trying to figure out just who it is that can take that torch and run with it.
I think that was my biggest takeaway, too. I mean, it started with a little bit of a fumble. Stuart Varney of Fox Business got off to a rocky start by stumbling his first line. And as
Yeah.
someone who does talk on camera for a living, I felt that. I felt bad because when that happens, you immediately, go into your head there. But it didn't seem to get any better from there. There was Dana Perino of Fox News, a Univision host, and Fox Business's Stuart Varney. What do you think they could have done better? Because even after one commercial break, Dana Perino had to remind the candidates of the rules.
Well, that's where you start, Brittany. So number one is you have to change the way the rules are enforced. Uh, no one can hear from the either in the studio audience or the audience at large can hear what's going on when people are kind of going at each other. They can't make out any of this, right? And the combatants on stage are thinking, well, I'm scoring a point. I'm getting I'm on top of this one, right? When in fact, the reality is no one's on top of anything. Everyone's ready to tune it out. So number one is they have to change what they do with the mics. When you go beyond, say, let's say you have a 5-second grace period after the bell rings, right? Then the mics go off. That's number one. Two is you take it a step further, which I think would empower the moderators in a good way. They could say, if you start talking over somebody else, we're not only going to kill your mic, we're going to ignore you for a while, right? You literally, almost like the teacher in front of the classroom, say to your pupils, if you go that way, I'm telling you, you're going to see the principal. And so I think that would improve this a lot. With that said, the staging last night, I mean, you're at the Ronald Reagan Library. You talk about a movie set for this kind of thing. And that I thought was ideal and should have really powered this show. But unfortunately, the takeaways in terms of the actual debate itself did not measure up to the Air Force One that was hovering over them on the set.
My mom had the exact same suggestion as you did, kill their mic, because we didn't learn much when they were all screaming at each other trying to make their points. But there were a broad range of topics discussed last night, everything from China, education, the economy, immigration. Do you think there was any topic that was missed? What questions did you want to see the moderators ask?
Yeah, there are a couple of them. I think they did score well, by the way, in terms of economics. You really got a sense from last night's 2 hours of debate that Americans are feeling a squeeze. That's not just about wages going up; it's about, unfortunately, prices going up faster, uh, Bidenomics, all the rest of that. I think they did a very good job there. Um, Abortion would be one issue. I think that was somewhat missed. I understood where Dana Perino was going with the question that I think she addressed to the governor from Florida, Ron DeSantis, on abortion, and it was something to the effect, what is your message to pro-choice women and independents, given the party's basically position on abortion? The question really should have been, because this is what I'm hearing all over the country, it's the word ban. When you talk about an abortion ban, and in Florida, for instance, they passed under the governor a 6-week ban. Others are at 10 weeks, 15 weeks, et cetera. That is really, I think, what is most concerning in the, we'll call it the post-Dobbs era on abortion, concerning for women who are not avowedly and totally pro-life, who are concerned that maybe they won't have a choice if, God forbid, they had to make a choice. They wouldn't have that choice. I thought that was a missed opportunity. And the final thing is, I think the whole thing having to do with China, which got scant attention, Brittany, in the first debate, got a little bit more here, mostly because Vivek Ramaswamy was swatting off the barbarians at the gate who were trying to take him on for his company's investments, past investments, and profiting from China. I think there's something deeper there for the party that they still need to get into, the combatants, because they say, all politics is local and that domestic politics always seems to trump international politics. But I think more and more in today's more global world, I think China and Russia, I think they actually did touch on the Russia-Ukraine situation decently. Those are becoming front of mind because they have tremendous bottom line consequence on the economics of our country, much less our national security.
You're totally right there. When I was in Iowa back in August, I had the opportunity to talk to voters, asking them what their biggest concerns were, and the top concerns always the economy and China. But it's clear you do think some of the losers last night were the moderators, but overall, who do you think the winners and losers were last night?
Well, I think everybody lost on stage last night to Donald Trump, in that there wasn't a breakout, what I would call a breakout performance. It's not a one-liner. Everyone says, well, who got the best zinger in, whatever. And you saw some of the attempts at that from Chris Christie and others kind of fell flat. It's not that. Who had a commanding performance last night? I don't think it was there last night. I think the governor of Florida, I thought Ron DeSantis did better than he did in the first debate, but I wouldn't call it commanding yet, but it was better. Nikki Haley, I think, is the most substantive person on stage, and yet she was embroiled in these more pugilistic exchanges with Tim Scott and others, which overwhelmed all the substance she was talking about. Chris Christie is still trying everything he can to go Donald Trump into attending a debate. Not going to work. The governor of North Dakota, no offense to the people of North Dakota, but trying to suggest that everything that North Dakota is doing somehow can be transferred easily to the leader of the free world. That's a bit of a reach. Tim Scott, I think, was more substantive last night than he was in the first debate, still not touching his best mark, I think, which is the ultimate American story. And finally, the vice president, Pence, who I think is still, how does he explain why he's running against his former, ticket mate, former president, and then Vivek Ramaswamy? I didn't want to lose that. Vivek was very forceful. He's very entertaining. But I think it was showed last night that he still is doing this out of textbooks as opposed to real life experience. And I think he did take on some water over his association with China, his defense of TikTok and the influencer. So bottom line, no one scored big last night. They go on to the next debate, as you know, in Florida, my home state of Florida, maybe with one or two less on stage as they start to increase the requirements for qualifying for the debate. But for that reason, having no commanding performance, no obvious winner, it was another win for the former president and his march to the nomination.
And he wasn't even there, which we will get into in a moment. But these debates are an opportunity for the average American who maybe might not be, in the weeds of politics or these candidates as much, to get a taste of who these people are. And one of the things that when someone's going to vote, it's, could I have a beer with this person? Are they my type of person? Did anyone come off as likable last night?
That is such a smart question, and you're so right on for this reason. These candidates come into these debates. I've been there a lot. So you go into all these meetings, you have all the policy books out, you go back and forth. What are you going to say if she says this or he says that and whatever else, to try to prepare yourself for battle? And in the middle of all that cramming, it's like cramming for a final exam, you miss the most obvious. People vote for people. Make sure you communicate yourself, not just your ideas and your smarts, yourself. I think that was really missing. As I said, Tim Scott, great, up from the bootstraps, ultimate American success story. You hear like almost none of that. You saw the governor of Florida try, in one of the questions later into the debate, talk about his military background and his experience seeing the memorial site at 9/11. That had some impact. I felt something for the first time, I think, from that governor in the other debate. I think that was missing. I think you got a little bit of that Nikki Haley in debate one, didn't get that last night. So to your point, if they cannot get beyond their minds and understand what I believe, which is we use our hearts to justify what we're feeling, and then we vote, we say with our minds, but it starts right here. And if you don't feel something, it's hard to intellectually rationalize when you get excited about something. I think that was missing.
Let's talk about the Republican infighting a little bit. You mentioned Vivek Ramaswamy. He felt like almost the kid brother on stage that everyone just wants to, attack and swat down. I mean, they could all come together and immediately turn. They were like, Vivek, enough. Nikki Haley said something to the effect of, every time I hear you, I feel a bit dumber. That was a strategy that across the board, everyone, aside from, I believe, Doug Burgum, swatted Vivek Ramaswamy down. There were also more pointed attacks at Donald Trump. In his first remarks, Governor Ron DeSantis said Donald Trump's missing in action. Chris Christie had that one kind of awkward line about calling him Donald Duck instead of Donald Trump for missing the debates. Do you think that Republican infighting is a smart strategy, or they should have focused their efforts a bit more on attacking President Joe Biden and his policies?
Well, I'll take the second part of your question first. I think it's a bad strategy. Given the numbers, given the relative positioning in this field, given the weakness of President Joe Biden. You talk about almost historic lows in terms of presidential approval, job performance, lousy marks on the economy, on law and order, on immigration, lousy marks, right? You would think that's easy. He's an easy target. You use the duck metaphor, a sitting duck, right? And yet there wasn't enough of that at the expense of them trying to one-up each other. And when they took on the president who wasn't there, which I think, regardless of what your feelings are about Donald Trump, to go after someone that's not there to defend themselves generally rubs Americans the wrong way. It doesn't feel fair. Not that, the former president would complain about this. I didn't think they scored at all. You saw the Donald Duck thing go completely south in terms of reaction in the studio. I think it's fair to say probably in the American audience too. I think the governor of Florida tried to take him on in terms of something substantive. That's fair, because he was talking about the national debt and how under Donald Trump, I think the national debt went up $7 trillion. It's up $5.5 trillion under Biden. That's fair. That was okay, but you're not going to take the president down to try to elevate you up. I think that would have been my advice to everybody on stage. Don't go there. You're not going to suddenly get a wind under your sails because you're going after someone who's up 30 points in the polls. That's not going to happen. Show what you've got, almost like Donald Trump doesn't exist. That if for some reason he wasn't in play, that the country could turn to you and say, yeah, I could be very comfortable there.
Let's talk about that big personality who wasn't in the room. As you noted, he does have a commanding lead in those polls, but instead he opted out to skip the debate last night and instead go to Michigan, where there are auto workers on a strike. Do you think that was a smart decision? What do you make of that?
Politically speaking, brilliant. I mean, number one, he goes to where the biggest news item of the week, other than potential shutdown rather, in Washington was with the United Auto Workers strike. The fact that the president of the United States came out of Washington to go on join that picket line, the first president ever to do that, was a made-to-order opportunity for Donald Trump to try to one-up him. And of course, Donald Trump, this goes into the previous discussion, he's focused on Joe Biden. The Republicans, some of the Republicans last night in the debate were focused on each other and on Donald Trump. I think that the former president has his eyes where they need to be. I thought, he did a typical, I watched his performance in Michigan for about 30 minutes last night. Fascinating, right? Vintage Donald Trump, full of stories and oratory, but he was very clearly saying to the auto workers of America, I've got your back. And he was communicating more directly to one person, Sean Fain, who's the head of the UAW union, saying, you and your team, your union need to endorse me. And kind of throwing down the gauntlet. It used to be a given, Brittany, that the unions were essentially about 100% going Democrat. The fact that they withheld their endorsement to this moment is really telling, because I think the union membership understands, regardless of what their feelings are about the presidential, that their membership is becoming more and more uneasy about Joe Biden's leadership in Washington, more and more uneasy overall with some Democratic policies. And they can't just say, well, speaking on behalf of the entire union, we're going this way. I think they needed the union members to, in a way, help drive the decision, as opposed to what normally happens in unions, which is leadership down.
In this conversation, really in every conversation nationwide, even on the debate stage, it was mentioned, Donald Trump seems unbeatable right now based on the polls. So what do you think that these contenders need to do to really break out from the pack and distinguish themselves?
I think that the others in the Republican field need a break. And they're not going to probably create that on their own. I think they quietly, and they never would say this publicly, are hoping that maybe the courts of law will wend their way into the courts of public opinion in a negative way for the former president, opening up this contest all over again. Still could, by the way. I mean, you just saw the decision come out of New York, and it was almost like a fly being swatted off by the former president. It didn't really affect him at all. It doesn't seem to have affected the polls. I think you put it this way, the breakout moment, if it's not going to be in a debate, and I don't think it's going to be, by the way, given we now have two under our belt, is going to happen in the state of Iowa. Okay, that is the first legitimate and full test where people actually vote, right, with their feet and with their hearts, where we'll get a read on this. If anyone running overperforms expectations, not even about winning there, say that Ron DeSantis came within 2 points of Trump in Iowa, or Nikki Haley, or Tim Scott, right, suddenly overperformed in a big way in Iowa, they then parachute very quickly into New Hampshire. If that person does well there, you have a whole nother look of a contest, perhaps, as opposed to a coronation.
You bring up an interesting point about Donald Trump's legal troubles. He has now been indicted 4 times. We haven't seen much movement in the polls. Why do you think that is?
I think, you know how they say about the markets, that they've already factored in all information in the price of the markets in a stock. I think people have factored it into Donald Trump. The stock of Donald Trump Inc. includes all sorts of impressions that I think are very baked in by now. Is he a perfect human being? No. Has he ever done anything he probably shouldn't have done? No. Are there things as president perhaps he should have done more of or done less of? Yes. I mean, all these things, everyone's kind of said, okay, we get it. We get all that. However, what Donald Trump does present, at least to Republicans, is strength. And also, it's a message against the system. He clearly, in 2016, Brittany, he ran against the system and he won. In 2024, and the first time I can say I've ever seen this in my lifetime or our lifetime, he's doing it again after having served as president for 4 years. He's still the outsider, and that still plays. And I think at a time when most Americans seem to be down the mouth about our prospects and our future, that still plays in a big way. That's the core of his message, and that's why he's so difficult to unlodge dislodged rather, as the nominee of this party.
Let's talk a little bit about the future here. The third debate, it's going to be tougher to get into in terms of qualifications. That will be November 8th in Miami. What should we look out for between now and then?
Well, anything in Miami has a lot of spice to it. That's my home state. So, you should expect some even more fireworks, even around the debate itself. I think there'll probably be one or two that will drop off that stage by then. No offense to the governor of North Dakota. I'm sure the people in North Dakota like him, but I think he seems out of place on this stage, and maybe one other doesn't make that stage. But does that create, again, as we talked about before, a breakout? I don't know, because I haven't seen yet any other than you can say that Nikki Haley, I think in the first debate, was a breakout moment for her. If she were to go back, like if I'm now, maybe this is the question. If you were to ask me, what would I suggest to the ones who will still be standing on that stage in Miami? To Ron DeSantis, I think he had a couple moments towards the end there where he showed some heart and some background, some bio. I would do more of that. If I'm Nikki Haley, I never engage with anyone again. She had the one line she could have used last night that would have won the night when Scott was all over her about what she was trying to say. She could have said something like, that's what guys do. That's what men do to women when they're trying to have their way. If she had delivered a line like that, she would have won the night going away. So I think she looked for that an opportunity to put everyone back in their shoes again if that were to happen. I think Vivek Ramaswamy, he's going to be great clickbait. He's going to be very entertaining. I don't see him as a serious play. I don't think Christie and Pence are more than kind of supporting actors in this play. So I think you're looking at this field very quickly coming down to most likely in terms of non-Trump. DeSantis, Haley, Nikki Haley, perhaps with an outside shot for one other person. That's it. And I think the American public is starting to focus in on it that way as well. They're going to look more directly at, I think, the two former the governor and the former governor as to that just might have presidential timber. And if not, despite what Donald Trump's saying, they could be number two.
A lot to look out for between now and then. Adam Goodman, per usual, thank you so much for your insights. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks for having me.